For our unit of inquiry, where we are in place and time, I wanted to experiment with using MinecraftEdu to help my students understand the central idea. Access to opportunities can be determined by geographical borders and citizenship. We were inquiring into factors that increase or decrease opportunities, such as wealth, location, citizenship, government, education, natural resources, gender, and what family you were born into. We also explored the human element that factors into opportunities, which embodied perseverance, grit, creativity, and resourcefulness. The first thing I did was find a Minecraft seed that would lend itself to our learning outcomes. Last year, I came across a seed that included every biome that existed in Minecraft. Since one of the factors that affects access to opportunities is physical geography, I wanted to use this seed to provide a virtual experience that mirrored the realities of ecosystems, biomes, and natural environments affecting the lives of people around the real world on a daily basis. In fact, the entire ideation around this learning experience was for students to experience virtually what exists in reality around the world. Each country, which was rich in different natural resources, also had different forms of government. Additionally, there were country-specific rights and roles that focused on gender and freedoms. These governments and gender roles were conceptualized in order to create one of the many tensions students would be facing as they lived within a particular country. The entire premise of their learning experience within MinecraftEdu was for students to experience inequalities. Since my students attend a private international school, many of them come from families of considerable wealth. Their learning experience inside MinecraftEdu was developed in order for them to experience what is often reflected in the real world: poverty, inequality, and immense gaps between the haves and the have-nots. But before I go further into socioeconomic tensions that were created, let's take a tour of the countries that students were born into. This is Candesia, which is mostly composed of desert and grassland. Candesia is the poorest country in terms of natural resources and is also considered the least beautiful. Candesia is a socialist state, where its citizens are in charge of collecting resources and working for the government, which is comprised of the wealthy few. Citizens must give the resources they collect to the government, which redistributes some wealth to the Candesians, but keeps most of it for themselves. In Candesia, hard labor, such as digging, building, and lifting, is reserved for the men. Soft labor, such as farming, cooking, and cleaning, is reserved for the women. This is Bundalia, which has a mix of deciduous and coniferous forests and access to plenty of fresh and salt water. Bundalia is governed by a democracy. Its citizens may vote on issues, but when it comes down to it, the wealthy are the ones who have the final say. The wealthy are the ones who control and run the government, and due to that, resources are not shared equally. Women are not allowed to freely roam in Bundalia. They must always be near a man. This is Nombanda, which is the most resource-rich country and the most desired to live in due to its natural beauty. It has high plateaus and mesas, forests, water, and a variety of other natural resources. Nombanda is governed by a monarchy, where the head of the country makes all of the decisions. Since the wealthy are connected to the government, the wealth and control stays in the hands of a few. In Nombanda, men and women must work and live separately. Finally, this is Tapigalu, which is a highland country whose citizens live mostly above the tree line in the mountains. In Tapigalu, minerals are prevalent and mining provides the potential for extraction that can yield high-value natural resources. Tapigalu is governed by a corporatocracy, where a small group of corporations control and influence decision-making. These corporations are owned and operated by the wealthy. In Tapigalu, wealthy and middle-class children are expected to go to school and be educated. However, the other children are expected to work and are victims of child labor. To appropriate students across these countries, they were divided into 4 groups. A Google form was used to determine who in my class were experts and who were novices. Students were then broken up into 4 groups to distribute expertise and prior knowledge equally. This data also informed the socioeconomic levels that students would be born into upon entering the world. There were 4 socioeconomic levels that students could be born into: very poor, poor, middle class, and wealthy. With 6 students being born into each country, 2 students were born very poor, 2 students were born poor, 1 student was born middle class, and 1 student was born wealthy. The one who was born wealthy was also considered the head of the government. Students were born into a citizenship of a given country and born into a family of a particular wealth. The experts in Minecraft were born into very poor and poor economic standing. Poor and very poor students were born into families that had resources which indicated farming, fishing, and primary source material extraction were their means of generating income. They had far, far less than those in middle class and next to nothing compared to those born into a family of wealth. Students who had little to no knowledge or prior experience in Minecraft were born into middle class and wealthy families, thereby giving them a major advantage and a head start in life, both through wealth and power. Middle class and wealthy students had tools and resources which made their life considerably easier, more comfortable, and not predicated on hard physical labor. Those born into wealth had a much easier time sustaining and generating more wealth by using the poor and the very poor citizens as employees. Wealth in the MinecraftEdu world was replicated by the natural resources and tools students were given upon birth. As a result of these socioeconomic tensions, there were also worldwide expectations that students had to follow. These created even further tensions of inequality and frustration upon citizens of lower socioeconomic strata. For example, wealthy and middle-class citizens could travel to other countries for leisure because they could afford a passport and visa. Poor and very poor students were not allowed to leave their country because they could not afford the transportation, and because there was fear that they would permanently migrate to a new nation, thereby straining the social system. Wealthy and middle-class citizens could travel to other countries on temporary work visas to look for potential imports and make business deals with those middle-class and wealthy citizens who were involved in exporting. However, poor and very poor citizens could not. More so, the wealthy citizens from each country could sell off part of their country's land to wealthy businesses from other countries, who would then extract the natural resources and import them back into their home country. Middle-class and wealthy citizens could complete trade deals at the economic free trade zone, where international exports and imports would pass through. But poor and very poor citizens could not visit this zone, and therefore had to employ middle-class and wealthy citizens to bring their goods there for them, for a fee or a tax. Poor and very poor citizens were not to be trusted at the economic free trade zone, and so were not allowed to go and do business. Other agreements were, citizens of a particular country could freely trade amongst each other at the local market in order to create more opportunities for themselves. Middle-class and wealthy citizens were allowed to travel to other countries, but had to pay a visa fee upon entering a new country, where the money went into the hands of the sole wealthy person, as they represented the government. In all cases, if there was a disagreement, the wealthy person, also acting as the government, would be in charge and have the final say as to what would happen. Those who did not follow the governing laws of their land, or who were caught illegally migrating, were subject to fines and/or imprisonment at customs and immigration. The learning objective inside MinecraftEdu was for students to increase their opportunities through education, employment, and wealth. As the students moved through 2 weeks in this virtual space, we anchored the learning and reflections in frequent student-centered discussions about what was transpiring in their world. At times, students discussed themes and concepts as a whole class. Other times, we broke into country groups or socioeconomic level groups to express concern, objection, revolution, or propose alternatives. Some of our guiding questions over the 2-week period in student-run discussion groups were: how can your country increase its opportunities? What is your role or responsibility inside the country you are a citizen of? How could you, born into the level of wealth you were, increase your own opportunities? What trade agreements could you make to help you export and import resources, thus increasing your opportunities? What business partnerships within and across borders could you make in order to trade and increase your opportunities? How might governments use visa fees and taxes to provide public services for their citizens? In the end, using MinecraftEdu for this unit was an amazing success and one of the more powerful learning experiences I've ever been able to afford my students. There were so many quotable moments and examples of inspired action taking place that it would take more than an hour to document it all. When I look back on the learning engagement, I will always remember shaking my head and telling a colleague that my students wouldn't stop talking about their learning. I'd have to ask them to please go to snack and lunch and play rather than sit outside my classroom and talk about issues they were facing in a virtual world. Now, this virtual world may seem like frivolous play to some adults, but it is more real to children than we will ever be able to comprehend. And this is where the power of MinecraftEdu as a learning tool lies. The virtual space blends into reality for most students, and what they experience in the realm of imagination is transferred and applied with equal emotion into their waking lives. After seeing what my students learned experientially in this engagement, and the resultant empathy that evolved from it, it could be said that Minecraft has the power to change the way future generations exist on this planet. It might just be a game to many of us, but in my opinion, Minecraft truly has the potential to change our students' future world.